Okay, very good. So today's lesson is all about setting boundaries to specifically combat burnout. So if you are joining or if you're seeing this on the replay, please let me know where you're tuning in from or what you do for work and how you found me. My name is Michelle Holmes. I am a transformational coach, author, speaker, consultant, and podcast host of the Flourish podcast. And I am also a dog mom, a stepmom, wife, and recovering workaholic. So this is my cute little dog here. This is my stepdaughter. And then these are some of the companies that I have worked with this past year, over the last year. So I have lived through burnout and things like chronic illness. I had stage 4 endometriosis for a number of years that was pretty debilitating. Anxiety, PTSD, adrenal fatigue, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder. What I have learned is that a lot of the people who I speak with also have some of these going on for them. So I believe that recovery of our own vitality is possible, and I love working with high performers and high achievers. These are individuals that I think have so much to give. I also believe that health is our wealth. I think that healing happens by way of the NS, that is nervous system, which you'll get some exposure to here. I certainly have other trainings that cover this in depth. We are never broken. Things haven't gone wrong with us. It's kind of an adaptation to what we've been exposed to. So we're not broken, and we can flourish. So my work typically centers around connecting the dots for people about what's really going on for them, because we don't always know what's going on with us. A lot of us are very disconnected. So if you are burnt out, you are in the right place with today's training. We're going to be talking about the steps that you can take to improve your level of burnout by way of boundaries. We are going to talk about why using them for burnout is a much needed strategy and something that I don't think is talked about nearly enough. We'll talk about how we're blocking our own progress, and then also mistakes, common pitfalls of setting boundaries, because a lot of people go wrong when they set boundaries. At the end, if we have some time for Q&A, of course, we can do Q&A, and then talk about next steps if you need further support. So why don't we jump right in? So I have a beef with massages. I love massages. I got massages for weekly for like a couple of years, where I would just go, I would feel really great. They would work out the kinks in my back. It was great self-care. But I think that the dialogue that we have about self-care right now needs quite a lot of work. So when we look at these things here, I see self-care. This is what the common narrative about self-care is. We have massages here, like this is a body work session where we're in our body, we're getting pampered. Over here, we might be going on vacation. This place looks amazing. I would love to go on vacation. And then over here, we have wine. And these things all have in common the typical idea when we say, oh yeah, I just need to make more time for self-care. It's also something that maybe not everyone has access to. I would love to go on this vacation, but man, my work schedule. I would love to get this massage, but not all of us have the time, the money, the energy to go and spend spend our valuable resources on doing these things. All of these more self-care activities are typically outside solutions. So we go to get a massage. Well, I did that for a while, and what I found was I felt great when I was getting the massage, and then I went back to my real life. And my real life was not all that relaxing. They take time, money, and planning. Like I said, valuable resources that not all of us have time to spare or have the ability to plan for this luxurious vacation. Many people have families and they can't really take the time away when they need a vacation right now. They need to do something right now. And we can't do most of them at work or with the kids. We are not going to be drinking wine at work in our stressful day. We're not going to be with the kids sitting down in a chair while we're getting a massage. That's just not real life. So self-care as we know it has to change. We do 100% need to take care of ourselves. So this is where I say boundaries is a huge part of the answer for us. So the beauty of boundaries is it's moment by moment support. When we are going through our day, we receive information all day long about where we're feeling good and where we're feeling not so good. Who's respecting our boundaries, who's not respecting our boundaries. We may not be consciously aware of it, but when we are able to create really supportive boundaries, we do have that moment by moment support. This is something that I can do no matter where I am, no matter who I'm with, or what kind of day I've had. Boundaries are also totally personal to us. That's huge, right? We're creating boundaries for our own self, not a cookie cutter sort of solution from somebody else, some guru who thinks that they know everything. You know, we are able to make this totally personal to what we need in our own individual life. They are also 100% free. It works in any situation. Like I said, wherever I am, I can have my boundaries with me, and it prioritizes our own well-being and safety. And when we look at burnout specifically, this over here, prioritizing our well-being and safety, is a huge component to that. So let's talk about what is a boundary. And feel free to put any thoughts that you have in the chat about this, but I love using this example here with Pam. Pam is a character on The Office. I am a huge Office fan. My husband and I both like to relax to reruns of The Office. And in the scenario that I'm thinking of that is a perfect example of what is a boundary, Pam went to work for a different company. If you know The Office, it's the Michael Scott Paper Company, and she went to work there. She went from a receptionist job to a salesperson role at her new company. And then as things would happen, eventually she ends up back at the original company, Dunder Mifflin. And at Dunder Mifflin, she was the receptionist. She was not a salesperson. But part of the negotiation when she came back was she's going to be a salesperson. She's no longer going to be a receptionist. So basically, she got a promotion. Now, one day, the new receptionist is not there or unavailable. I think maybe she was out for the day because she was sick. And the phone rings. And everyone looks at Pam. Now, Pam it's no longer her responsibility. She's not the receptionist. But everyone looked at her like, hello, are you going to answer the phone? And then it becomes this really tense moment where everyone is looking like pleading, practically begging her to answer the phone. And she doesn't, because that's not her job. No one else was going to answer the phone. No one else is taking on responsibilities that are not their own. So Pam decides to hold that boundary. I think that is such a good example, especially when I talk to people about in the workplace, what do boundaries look like? So we are setting limits for ourselves about what we will or will not tolerate. So the boundary is not for other people. Really, it is to keep us safe, to keep us well, to support our well-being, not necessarily going around and saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. No, it's not the way we want to think about it. That's where we'll have boundaries that go off the rails. They need to be supportive for us. So it's a limit that we set for ourselves. They exist for us, by us. We are the ones who develop our boundaries. So I love this quote here by Glennon Doyle. She is the author of Untamed, and I think that this is such a good example of what boundaries can sort of do for us. So every time you're given a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, your duty is to disappoint that someone else. Your job throughout your entire life is to disappoint as many people as it takes to avoid disappointing yourself. I think this is so beautiful because a lot of us can relate to being the person that always has to make the sacrifice for themselves. They're the ones who are staying late at work because they don't want to disappoint their boss or their client. They're the ones that are bending over backwards within their family. When we look at it this way, if we think our job throughout our entire life is to disappoint as many people as it takes, as long as we are happy with ourselves, as long as we're not disappointing ourselves, that gives a new perspective. And I know for me as a coach working with people, this is a huge component. So let's talk about how we block our own progress. I like this image here because I believe a lot of people can relate. When we think about work today, we have a lot going on. So here, what do you see? I see multitasking when I look at this image here. This is some sort of book, it looks like, maybe a planner, who knows, computer, the phone call is happening, she's taking notes, she's maybe signing something, I don't know, it looks like important documents. She's drinking coffee, and she has her calculator in her hand as well. This is a lot. This is certainly a lot, but she looks great. Look, I see her face. She's got like perfect makeup, perfect like outside appearance. So she's holding it together. But when I look at this, I see a lot of maybe not so good things for her as well. So I see stress and maybe some burnout here. Definitely multitasking. To me, it looks maybe a little overwhelming. She is doing too much. She's wearing many hats. She might be having a little bit of resentment over here. And then caffeine, lots of caffeine. I have lived this life before. I have spent a lot of time consuming caffeine so that I could continue working instead of listening to my body's need for rest. Okay, so if we think about some of the things I've said here, resentment, taking on too much, many hats, wearing many hats, doing a lot of things. I'm a business owner, so I wear many hats. I know how this is, but in every professional role that I had, my degree is mechanical engineering. I used to work as an engineer, and no matter what company I worked for, no matter how big it was or how small it was, no matter how important my role was, or how kind of like small my role was within the company, I would wear many hats. And I'm sure you in your own life could probably relate to that as well. These things, when we look at resentment, taking on too much, wearing many hats, what I think is they're a failure to communicate or enforce our limits with others. Okay, we think about resentment, and this is really big in family dynamics, right? You have a wife and a partner, and there can be some resentment there with the role that everyone is playing. And oh my gosh, I have to do the laundry again, and you can't even take out the trash, all these little things that add up. Well, failure to communicate or enforce our limits with other people. Okay, maybe it's our boss or a coworker or even a client. So if we look at some of the other things we saw in that, we saw overwhelm, we saw stress, most likely stress, unhealthy caffeine intake. If you can relate to any of these, what does that look like for you? Well, I say that's a failure to abide by our limits with ourselves, right? So we have boundaries that support ourselves, and we have boundaries that support our roles that we have with other people. So let's take a moment to really think about that for a second here. If we have two sides of the same coin, we are failing to communicate or maybe enforce a boundary, a limit with other people. And then we have a failure to abide by our limits with our own self. These are failure of our boundary. We may not have boundaries. We may not communicate them effectively. Your boss is going to put more on your plate unless you say, hey, I have these 3 other projects, right? Unless we say, I can't do that to a client. If somebody says, I need this back by the end of the day today, and you say, I'm unable to do that, and, let's come up with a solution, but I am unable to do that, we're not enforcing our limits. If we're not sticking to the things that we have set out that are very supportive to us, so let's say I want to get 8 hours of sleep a night, I want to eat healthy meals, I want to make the time that I need to make for myself in a fun environment. If we don't do that, we're failing to listen and follow the boundaries that we've set with ourselves. So there is good news. The remedy here is just developing effective boundaries. So I like to say there are no failures, just discovery. So let's go on a journey. And I will say, buckle up. I love Gordon Ramsay. Buckle up, because I also like to be very direct and give people kind of the information that maybe they really need to hear. So over in this chart here, I have overcommitted, controlling, lack of support, lack of resources, being unwilling to receive, people pleasing. We have the office mom. When I worked in offices, I could always identify the office mom. And maybe if you work with all men, you have the office dad, but somebody takes on that role. And that's a really important role to them. Being unwilling to delegate. So all of these things here, I see in other people. When we take kind of an audit of their life, we can see, oh, they are overcommitted. They cannot release control of maybe the household or the project or something. Parenting, for instance, you have one parent that sometimes is like so controlling compared to the other, and so we have a contributing factor that lead us down to feeling burnt out, feeling anxious, feeling like we're brewing some resentment here. So we're not listening or enforcing the boundaries. Maybe we haven't established the boundaries with some of these contributing factors here. Codependence, enabling, anxiety, all of these things play a role. And they, a lot of times, are rooted in our own limiting beliefs. So I have 5 limiting beliefs here, and I have a whole presentation on limiting beliefs. So if you want more on this specifically, I have that on my YouTube channel, or you can just message me and I can get that over to you. But some of these limiting beliefs that play a role in driving us towards burnout and preventing us from some of these boundaries are things like, my work is hard. If we have this belief about work, that we always have to be working, or for instance, my salary means I must always be working. When I worked as an engineer, I basically almost doubled my salary in just a couple of years, because I changed companies a few times and I was like climbing the ladder, so to speak. And when I hit the 6-figure mark, I was like, oh my gosh, it was this big kind of like moment for me where I thought, my salary means I always need to be working. I have to prove my worth. I have to show my worth to my employer. It was almost like I felt like I constantly needed to just prove myself and show them that I was worth the 6-figure salary that they were paying me. I am not worthy of whatever it may be, support, a higher salary, help, rest. If we have a limiting belief of not being worthy for good things, not being worthy of support, or that higher salary, we are going to be driving towards burnout. We aren't going to have the appropriate boundaries in place around this. If we think we're not worthy of help, we can look at our job, for instance. If we have all these coworkers that we know could help us in some capacity, but we think we're not really worthy of the help, we have to take it on, we're not going to utilize them. I need to earn rest. This one is huge, actually, for a lot of the people that I work with, because they do consider themselves high performers and high achievers. And for me, like I said, my degree is mechanical engineering. Before that, I was valedictorian in high school. Ever since 7th grade, I got straight A's in every subject. And I found myself completely burnt out when I was 25 years old. That was 8 years ago now. But it was this constant hamster wheel of moving forward for me that it was like everywhere I went, if I had a carrot in front of my face, the carrot was just moving farther away, no matter how close I got. It was like just a new milestone that I needed to get, and it was like, okay, you'll rest when you get there. And then I would get there, and I was like, no, I can't rest. I have to do all this now. So it's been a journey. I can't trust anyone. This is also a really big one, because if we say I can't trust anyone, that means we think that no one else can do as good of a job as we can do. We can't trust. I've heard women talk about this. I can't trust my husband with the kids. I don't think that he's going to take care of the kids in the way that I'm going to take care of the kids. Okay, well, that's a problem. I can't trust the people I have working on this project with me. I can't trust them to do a good job, so I'm going to overexert myself with that. And then finally, another limiting belief that I see quite often is I don't have enough time. I just don't have enough time to fit that in. I don't have enough time to sleep those 8 hours that I need to because there's just not enough time in the day. And like I said in the beginning, I am a stepmom, I am a wife, I have my cute little dog right over there. So I know as a business owner, I have felt a lot like I don't have enough time, but we do have, everyone has the same amount of time. That is the one resource that is universal. Everyone has the same amount of time in every day. So we have time for what we make time for. So let me know if any of these resonate with you. Feel free to put those in the chat. And let's talk about limiting beliefs. So when we have looked at those 5 limiting beliefs, those were just examples. Everyone has different things that really speak to them and kind of are driving them in their life. But these limiting beliefs are based on the experiences that we've been through. So I like to use this GIF over here with putting on the glasses. And this one over here, she's got these red glasses. We think of like rose-colored glasses. So if you've ever heard the expression, you're seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, that's what I want you to focus on for your limiting belief. When you see the world through these rose-colored glasses, it's a lens that you are taking in everything that you see around you with. So the limiting belief is what you see the world through, and you're usually not even conscious of it happening. So we need to get out of our own way with this. So I'm going to say the beginning of this is for us to start tuning in, right? We think about self-care, we think about mindfulness, we got to tune in. Maybe we're going to do some breath work, maybe we'll do some yoga, all of that. But I'm going to say we're going to tune in, and it's going to be easier than even something like breath work or doing a yoga thing. Because like I said, if you go to the yoga studio and you feel great, although that's very supportive, and I 100% believe that yoga is so great for us and can be incredibly healing, it's only one component of what's helpful, and it's still an outside solution. Because if you're in a meeting and your meeting is getting really heated, or you're at home and your kids are acting crazy, right? Then we can't just leave all of that and go to yoga. We can do that after work. We can let our partner watch the kids while we go take care of ourselves. But what happens when we can't? So I want to share this quote with you. It's by Viktor Frankl. He's a neurologist, a psychologist, and a Holocaust survivor. So he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And this quote here is a really famous, very important quote for us to think about when we're talking about all things like limiting beliefs, trauma, self-awareness, okay? So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, the first time when I read this quote, I didn't really get it. But going through certifications as a trauma support specialist and a couple other certifications that I have under my belt now, I eventually knew exactly what he meant here. So between stimulus, let's think about this as like between stress and response, there is a space. So between stress and the way we respond to it, there's a little space in there. So in that little space between the thing happening and us reacting, we have the power to choose. And what we choose will help us or harm us, basically. So what we choose is where we can grow, where we can find freedom, where we can stop being hijacked from stress reaction. And a lot of times the front end of the work that I do with clients is widening this space for them, because when we have stress, we immediately go to reaction. When you get an email, you immediately go to full body shutdown, so overwhelmed, papers are like flying everywhere in your mind. You have too many tabs open, right? Okay, so between that and your reaction, there is that space there. Because this is so important for us to identify. The feelings that we have, disappointment, for perfect example, disappointment doesn't always register as disappointment. We see this show up as resentment, overwhelm, anxiety. This can show up in many different ways for you personally. But if you're not tuning in, then we miss that signal. We don't know the signal. This is the first indication that a boundary has been crossed. So we need to start tuning in. And a really great way to do this is self-regulation. So emotional self-regulation, what we will refer to as just self-regulation here, refers to the ability to manage disruptive emotions and impulses arising from those emotions. A good way of putting this is when I am able to self-regulate, I come back to being cool, calm, collected. Doesn't mean that everything in my life is perfect, but it does mean that I have that space that Viktor Frankl was talking about, and I am able to then be intentional with my actions instead of reacting. Because what we see typically with reacting is that we may go into anger or anxiety or like, this fight energy, or we might try to get away, we might shut it down and leave for the day, we can't handle it. Or we have on the opposite side this feeling of just 1,000,000 pounds on our shoulders, that the world is so heavy, that we're depressed, and we have these kind of like these emotions, these impulses here that are arising from the state that we are in. So when we have the self-regulation, we are able to come back into reality. There's science behind it. When we're this is its own presentation on its own, which I actually do have on my YouTube channel as well. So if you need that, it's Nervous System 101 that goes into this in depth. But when we talk about self-regulation, the takeaway is unless you are in a regulated state, your prefrontal cortex is not even online. So the front part of your brain is not functioning optimally because our body is hijacked. So we use self-regulation to come back into a regulated state, and then we have access to the whole part of our brain, which is amazing. We need that. We need that. Okay, so AKA how to keep our cool. So there are many techniques to keep our cool. And I've included some of these gifts here because we have like dog yoga, maybe funny videos help you. We have Will Ferrell over here who's saying you just need to relax. And a dog getting vacuumed on his belly. He seems like he really enjoys it. And this is great, right? There are so many ways to self-regulate. Some of them are not so stealthy, and that I see as an obstacle for some people. Okay, so think of these as like tools in your toolbox. So they're not so stealthy when you can't practice it anywhere. So if, like I said, if I'm in a meeting or if I'm with my kid who's acting crazy or in a disagreement with someone, like this is huge, or in my car in traffic, right? I can't just do yoga. I'm driving or I'm sitting at my desk. Can't just do yoga. I can't do a lot of the other techniques that you see even on social media, because social media has a lot of self-regulation activities that are great, but you wouldn't want to do them in a meeting. So they're not great if you need something other than just yourself, because at any given moment, I want you to be able to utilize a skill that just requires you. And I want no one to know about it. I want no one to know about it. If you are in a situation where you need to self-regulate, I don't want you to have to tell everybody, hey guys, just need to self-regulate here. Just give me like 5 seconds, 30 seconds, and I'll be okay. No, it's not the time and place. When we need to self-regulate, we're typically in a situation that is not very fun right now. We're not enjoying what's happening. Our space has collapsed. So we need to just immediately be able to utilize the skill. So I have a skill for you. It is the wet noodle. And I want you to think of yourself as pasta. So you are pasta. And I will guide you through, let me see my next slide here. Okay, yeah. I will guide you through what it is to do the wet noodle, because this technique meets all of the requirements, okay? Employ it 200 times a day if you wish. So when we think about doing the wet noodle, when you're in stress, when you are in burnout, your muscles are not relaxed and in a state where you are self-regulated, like you're not that. So the wet noodle aims to get you into this physiological state that's giving yourself cues, your body, your nervous system, that you're safe. There's no threat here. We're going to be okay. And that you have the parts of your brain that you need to have in high stressful environments, that sort of thing. So with the wet noodle, it's very easy. It takes about maybe 10 seconds, and you can do it wherever you are, in the car, standing, sitting, whatever it may be. And so if you're sitting, because right now I am sitting at my desk, you can take a deep breath. And as you exhale, I want you to think about, just from the top of your head, if you were like a pasta noodle, you were getting hot water poured on you and you were becoming more pliable. Okay, so you were becoming flexible. You're no longer that like tense pasta noodle, you're flexible. So from the top of your head all the way down, you're going to have this awareness and you're going to soften. You're releasing the tension. You're looking in your body as you progress down all the way to your toes, and you are finding and releasing muscle tension. What this does is, like I said, it brings the brain back online. When you are no longer in muscle tense, when your body is not clenching anymore, it begins to feel safe. And that's really important there. So the wet noodle you can do, I'm sure, let me know if you felt better when you were doing the wet noodle. But the other technique that's really easy for me to remember, when I was in college, we used to do beer crawls, but we did PBR. So I went on a PBR beer crawl with my friends. We had an awesome time. And so when one of my colleagues told me, you got to do the PBR, and I was like, I'm interested now. Tell me more. But it's pause, breathe, relax. Pause, breathe, relax. And these two techniques here both aim to get your body in this physical state of, I am no longer in a stress response. I am cultivating safety in my body. So this creates that space that Victor was talking about. Then we pair it with intentionality, because when you have that space, as he said in that quote, therein lies our power to choose and our freedom. So we have the ability to choose how to respond when we have that space. So number one, first we create the space. Number two, we determine what's going on for us. What are we feeling? What just transpired in front of us? What is the deal with what's going on in this scenario right here? And sometimes we know that, sometimes it takes a little while to unpack. But what we can always do is determine our reaction. So how are we going to respond? If we have intentionality, we get to choose and execute on the way that we wish to be, basically. So when we're thinking about being intentional, we want to make sure that we can go ahead and act on it, what we have planned. We're not going to be able to act on it if our body is perceiving threat. If we are in a space of stress, we are not able to be intentional the majority of the time. So let's talk about the building blocks of good boundaries. So self-awareness, which we've covered so far in this piece, and then the self-check-ins as well, because that is what gives us a lot of feedback when we are checking in with ourselves. So I want to give you some examples that you can use for boundaries at work. I know for me, it took me a long time to fully understand boundaries and actually begin to create good supportive boundaries for me. And seeing other people's examples were very helpful. So an example here, sure. Would you like me to prioritize that over what I'm already working on? This is a great one. If your boss is piling things on your desk, or you have a client. I work with a lot of people who are high performers in sales. I also was in sales. So I know how big of a deal it is to please your clients and make sure that you're developing business continuously. But we have to be real with the resources that we have, the time, the energy. So we can say something like, yes, I can do that, but would you like me to do that over what I'm already working on? Because I can't do both. Not answering 7 p.m. phone calls. If you don't want to answer 7 p.m. phone calls, it's your responsibility not to do that. It's not someone else's responsibility not to call you at 7 p.m. It's your responsibility not to answer. Declining FaceTime calls. This is one coming from my personal experience, these two over here, because I would get FaceTime calls from clients when I worked in sales in San Diego. And I was like, what is happening here? Not only was it a FaceTime call, sometimes it was a FaceTime call at 7 p.m. And I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing a FaceTime with anyone that is crossing the line for my personal boundary. I'd love to participate. I am free in 2 weeks to discuss further. This one is great when you are somebody who is continually met with good opportunities. I know for me, I have friends that are doing amazing things, and they're like, hey, do this with me. But I don't have the capacity to do it, but that doesn't mean I don't want to do it. So we can say something like, to respect my time, like for me to respect my own schedule right now so that I am able to get the sleep and I am able to like do the things that I want to do without like pulling out my hair. I want to talk to you about this in a couple of weeks because that's when I have the availability. So we need to have this self-awareness of when do we have the availability. It might be I'm free to talk about that in 3 months from now, but not right now. And then I can do that. Here is my fee for the change of scope. This is a big one here because like I said, with working in sales and working in client-facing work, a lot of us, our lives could be run by clients. And so this is a really good boundary for you've changed the deliverables on this. It's going to cost you. I'm happy to do it. I absolutely can do it. That's fine, but I'm not going to do it without getting paid for it. Boundaries at home is I hear what you're saying and my answer is still no. Leaving or downgrading friendships. I had to do this. I think last year, actually, I had a longtime friend who would just never be very supportive. And so what's your boundary with that, with a friend who's not supportive? You can leave or maybe just downgrade the friendship. So it's more of not going to be your best friend. Maybe it's just more so an acquaintance. So you can still be in each other's lives, but you have to respect yourself. I will only wash the clothes in the hamper. Oh my gosh, my husband, he can relate to this one. I won't pick up the clothes on the floor. If I feel like I'm constantly doing the housework, what does that create in me? That creates resentment in me. I feel disappointed. I feel mad. Okay, well, what's the boundary? The boundary is if you want your clothes washed, put them in the hamper. Those are the only clothes I'm washing. This is a very actionable boundary. This is why I love some of these examples here. I am trying to eat healthier, so I will meet you after you go out to eat. That's holding the boundary with ourselves, with the commitment that we made for ourselves. I am trying to be healthier. I would love to hang out with you, but I'm not going to Mexican. You know what happens at Mexican. I eat all the chips. I drink margaritas, the whole thing. I'm trying to be healthier. So let's just meet after you're done eating. Leaving a party if your partner drinks too much. This is one that just kind of shows you boundary. We have no control over other people, but we can control ourselves. I prefer not to talk to you about that until I learn more about my own feelings on the matter. This is for my people pleasers out there, for people who don't have a strong intuition yet. It takes time to grow, and we do have to tune in. For me, for a lot of my, practically my whole 20s, it was just everybody was just telling me, you need to do this, you need to do this. You shouldn't do that, what I needed to do with my life. And I needed to find my own feelings out about it. I needed to figure out, well, how does that jive with me and my own beliefs? And we can't do that if everyone's constantly in our ear. So a good boundary is just, let's not talk about that until I get better with myself, if we talk about it at all. Maybe we don't want to talk about it, but a really good actionable boundary is just, I need to figure it out for me first. So let me know if you have any boundaries that resonate with you that you saw here, or if you have some of your own. All right, so let's talk about, we're on the tail end of this presentation. So where do we go wrong? Well, I guess not where do we go wrong with boundaries, but what happens when our boundaries are not respected? So this is $1 million question. What do we do when boundaries are not respected? Because so many people say, I've tried everything and no one has listened, right? And we have to enforce our boundary. That's part of it. So number one, I always say expect violations because they absolutely will happen. Number two, you have to define an appropriate course of action. And then you have to determine, well, what am I going to do if my boundaries are crossed multiple times? So if somebody violates my boundary multiple times, what is my action plan? So if you don't decide, someone else will decide for you. This is such a pertinent quote regarding boundaries because if we think about life, people love to run our life for us. You know, we have a boss that wants us to do everything we can, you know, squeeze all the goodness out of an employee and be superwoman or superman, whatever it is. Someone else will decide for us unless we have identified and decided what kind of life we need to live for ourselves. Okay, so an example of where we go wrong is with this that kind of ties the $1 million question and where we go wrong in together is if we have a boundary that's just too strong. If you have spent your entire life feeling like you're walked on or nobody respects you or nobody's listening to you, it can be really easy to develop a boundary that is just so strong. And that's more so like putting up a wall because we don't want to be hurt anymore. It hurts when people walk on us, you know, hypothetically speaking, I guess. It hurts when no one is respecting us. So we want a boundary that is appropriate and that it's not just shutting down. Like, for example, if your boss calls you and wants you to come in on a Saturday to work and you quit the company. Well, some might say that's an example of too strong of a boundary. You don't need to quit the company. What you could do is go ahead and have a conversation. Or you could say no and see how that goes over. You know, there's lots of different options. And when we have a boundary that's too strong, typically we're not looking at the other options. So another example of that is an inappropriate consequence. So like I said, if you have that boss that calls you and your consequence for him maybe calling when you said not to call is to quit, is that appropriate or is that not appropriate? A lot of times the inappropriate consequence stems from us really not knowing what else to do in the situation. So there are lots of things that we can do. Some of them are a conversation. Some of them are just developing a plan. If you do this, then I am going to do this. Because this over here, this takes care of me. This is what keeps me safe and sane and just really is how I care for myself. So if you continue to do this, I have to do this to take care of me. And we see this quite often in relationships. Another area that we go wrong is an old boundary that's no longer relevant. I love this one here because we all grow and we change, and things that were important to us once may evolve over time, and different relationships, of course. I know for me, older relationships that I was in, I would have boundaries around that because I had to have a boundary around my partner drinking. And now my husband he doesn't drink at all. So there needs to be no boundary there really anymore. but things that are no longer relevant to us, where we have grown, or a boundary that does not resonate. This is also great for us to kind of dive into about, does this resonate for me? Or is this a boundary that someone else is telling me I need to have? A good example here is when I travel. I love traveling alone. I love traveling. Of course, I'm always very safe. But I love traveling and road tripping and all of it. And my family is very traditional, and so they don't love that. They wish I would not travel alone or take a road trip alone. And so for them, it's like, oh my God, you're going by yourself. You know, this is inappropriate. Your husband needs to be with you. All of this, you know, kind of thing. But it doesn't resonate with me. So the first time they said it, they got me kind of riled up, and I was like, yeah, I agree. That's not right. He should be with me, even though it was my idea in the first place. And then I had to think about it. I had to take that time. Let me see how I feel about it. And then I realized this doesn't resonate with me at all. I love traveling alone. No way. So we need to make sure, is the boundary authentic to us, right? Is it authentic to us? So boundaries encompass our safety. That's what they're there to support. Our physical safety, 100%, our mental safety and our well-being here, socially, financially, spiritually, environmentally, and vocationally. So we can always come back to our own truth, our self-awareness, and our intentions, the intentions that we set for who we want to be. We can get to know the sensations in our own body because they always have something to tell us. It's really important we start listening, and I think that if you go through your day, you will start to notice, if you do a quick scan, or if you start really tuning in, maybe you do a wet noodle, you start to realize, I am learning so much about my body, but I'm learning more about what feels good and what doesn't feel good, what feels supportive and what doesn't feel supportive. Do I feel safe or do I not feel safe? And it's not just on a physical level. It can be, do I feel emotionally heard? Do I feel respected? Do I feel like people care about me and love me, right? A lot of the boundaries we have and the feelings that we have around that is because of all the emotional work underneath of what that really means to us. So we have the power to grow. We have the power to cultivate change. We absolutely can heal, and we are not broken. So if you take away from this presentation any little component, like it's all so unique to you, you are the one who gets to decide your next steps and what really speaks to you. So I would love for you to take action on something today. Please remember the wet noodle or PBR and utilize that self-regulation technique in your day-to-day life. I think it will absolutely help you. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can scan this QR code and connect with me there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I love the platform. And if you need additional support, like I said, I am a transformational coach. These are the types of things that I work with my clients on as well. So if you need help in this area, I'd be happy to talk to you and figure out what that might look like for your personal situation. And if you have any questions, please let me know.